Story 1. Insurance brokers. But it would be hard for the first 10 years. But once you have built your client base, you just have to renew them and keep the clients happy every year and take the commission. Story 2. Sometimes in big, fast-growing, fast-moving companies, you can end up in a random work-from-home job that pays well, and you literally do nothing all day. I think people even forget you are there. It is a strange artifact of the current world we live in, and I cannot imagine it lasting forever, but I know a guy who had one of these jobs and was also able to do basically full-time freelance work at the same time that he collected a full-time paycheck in benefits. It lasted for about 2 years until somebody realized and let him go. Story 3. My pharmacy director gets Friday to Sunday off and goes home early every Thursday. His work involves coming in at 9 a.m., attending a few meetings a day at his desk, then leaving by 1 p.m. I don't know how much he makes, but I know he owns a $2.3 million home. Story 4. I worked as a night watchman for nearly 30 years. I never made a lot of money, but hardly worked at all. For over 2 decades, I worked one night watchman job where I worked maybe 40 minutes a shift and the rest I goofed around, including sleep. Story 5. High-level individual contributors in remote positions where their managers only care about deliverables. In simple terms, they don't manage people, and those they report to only care about the end product. They never miss a deadline, but only work 20 to 30% of their working hours. Story 6. It's not insane money, but I make about $60,000 a year in a water treatment plant, watching movies, playing games, or doing whatever I want for 55 minutes out of every hour. Story 7. I was a sales manager for a decade and legitimately didn't do anything. You get into upper management and you realize everyone is also watching YouTube all day. Aside from meetings, I'd probably do an hour of work a day, sometimes less. And the idiots were paying me $150,000 per year base salary plus commission, bonuses, and profit sharing. Story 8. I remember reading about someone who was hired by a large corporation to work on a team. When he arrived for work, the office was empty, but he thought, it must be a work-from-home day. Turned out his whole team had been let go. Apparently, his paperwork hadn't made it to the unit that decided to let the team go. So he just sat there in his cubicle for a few months doing his own thing. When he posted about it, he still had his job and was wondering how long it would last. No idea about the eventual outcome. Story 9. IT architecture. $200,000. You have to know how IT components fit together, but it's quite simple. I basically just create drawings of what I want other people to build. Story 10. I was a radar testing engineer at Raytheon for most of a year. Got paid about $65,000 a year to sit there and watch YouTube. Occasionally, I would look up at a wall of blinking lights and make sure they were all blinking. Then nod. Then look at a wall of non-blinking lights and make sure they were all non-blinking. Then nod. Then go back to YouTube. If any light was doing what it wasn't supposed to, the order of operations was 1. Sad head shake. Toot toot. Bad test. Run the one-line script to turn it off. Pull the massive power levers to turn it off. Optional. Declare. Pull the lever, cronk. Wait a minute. Pull the massive power levers to turn it on. Optional. Declare. Pull the lever, cronk. Run the one-line script to turn it on. 10. Check the lights. That's it. That's all I did. People at work were expressing their jealousy of me because it was one of the coveted positions that I had gotten as a not-quite-college new hire. So-called because it's a low-effort job that scales its pay well over time, and short of committing literal treason, you can stay in that post until retirement. At first, I joked around with them, but 6 months in, I had to put on a fake smile and keep myself from saying, yeah, it's a great job that's so completely and utterly meaningless that each day I find fewer and fewer reasons not to drive my car straight into the barriers on my drive to and from work. So I quit, got a master's degree in video game programming, and got a job working on literally my favorite title. Story 11. I became a webcam model when I was 21. I never took my clothes off. I didn't even talk. All I did was just sit there and pretend to laugh at people who talked to me. I was in school at the time to be a therapist, so I was good at talking to people. And I would make about $500 an hour. It was sad, though. Lots of lonely people out there. A majority of my customers were men who would get off work and come home and go talk to webcam models, so they didn't feel like they were alone. But I stopped doing it because people get obsessive, and it wasn't safe after I had a run-in with a stalker. But that's a whole other story. Story 12. It helps to work for people who do not really know what you do. I am a technical writer, and I can work about 4 times faster than anyone thinks I can. So most weeks, I can get a week's work done in 10 to 15 hours and still have lots of energy left to occasionally complete something in record time when there is an emergency. The pay is somewhere between okay and pretty good, but the work-life balance is amazing. It also helps that I enjoy this kind of writing. It is like getting paid to do crosswords. Story 13. I worked as a customer success manager for a Fortune 500 company for 2 years and made $180,000. It was the easiest job in the world because the product worked and people loved it. Customers would not even talk to me because of how well it worked. Unfortunately, I was part of a mass layoff earlier this year, but I could have kept benefiting from that. Story 14. Quality assurance folks. A girl I knew in the Navy got out, got her Bachelor of Science in Quality Assurance, and makes $450,000 going around to local industrial plants, inspecting them, sitting in her truck while her subordinates inspect them, and then giving the owner, manager, or whoever a paper full of their mistakes. Story 15. My job is pretty nice. Government job. Pretty much a glorified secretary. But I get all my work done in an hour or less and spend the rest of the time watching YouTube for over $100,000. Not crazy rich, but good salary for playing on my phone. Story 16. A lot of remote technology jobs are great opportunities. I just left one because the company was so incompetent, but I was able to skate for a year doing much of nothing except playing video games during the day and got paid well. Edit. Folks, it's not as good as it seems. Story 17. Once I stumbled into a technology role where my main task was just monitoring systems. Most days, I did maybe an hour of actual work and spent the rest watching Netflix. Paid decently too, but eventually, they figured it out and restructured the team. Story 18. I work as a client services director in the market research industry. This is a 6-figure job that mostly involves emails and phone calls. Highly recommend. I also worked as a professional chef for over 12 years. This is hard work that will wreck your body, knees, sleep patterns, social life, and temperament. The pay is poor. The benefits are non-existent. Hollywood spins this as romantic. It is not. Avoid. In my experience, being an art director, my mother is an artist and graphic designer, is fairly low stress. These people can make a very good living if working in marketing or graphic design. My wife is a school teacher. This job is extremely tough. Long hours, thankless, poor pay, constant disrespect, emotional turmoil, and the pay is very low. Avoid. I would say being a musician is the easiest job. My grandfather was an acoustic guitar maker, Spanish folk musician, and instructor. He made a great living and traveled the world. He died in a nice house playing guitar. Peaceful and easy life. My 2 cousins and their mother are also musicians and have a good living off their musical talent. One of these cousins played on a few records as a session player and has been getting steady checks for decades. His mother sang background vocals on a few songs and likewise has collected checks for years without any further effort. The downside is that being a musician is common. You need luck, talent, persistence, or a combination of each to make a decent wage from music. But it is the easiest in terms of labor. Story 19. Data Center Union Electrician. You take notes, simulate failures to develop procedures, and mostly sit around. You're paid to know how to fix things when problems arise. Except when they do, you just get a contractor to fix it instead while watching football or something. Source. I actually do the work for about 1/3 of the money. Story 20. Health and Safety Officer. This guy at my work is one. Every day during stand-up, he just recycles the same PowerPoint over and over every day. Gets 6 figures easily. Story 21. Repairing computers. I posted flyers advertising myself for personal computer repairs when I was 17 around my suburb. People were more than happy to pay $120 for it. All you do is back up their personal files, reformat, install a fresh Windows operating system, and then copy their files back. And while that's processing, have a nap, play some games, watch a movie. I had one woman who paid me $60 to fix her solitaire shortcut from her desktop. Story 22. My corrections officer friend told me about a job in the prison where he works. If a member of the dog squad is unable to look after their dog because of sickness or injury, the dog is cared for on-site. It's someone's job to walk the dog twice a day and clean up after it for $900 a day. Story 23. Fire Battalion Chief. Drive your own SUV to fires while living out your childhood fantasies. Bark orders at the guys at the business end of a hose. Push papers and collect a paycheck with cushy early retirement, while telling friends and neighbors how dangerous your job is. Story 24. Orthopedic sales representatives make $100,000 per year to be a gopher. Surgeon needs a 54 instead of a 56? Let me go fetch it for you. They might have to step out of the room and open a box. Story 25. Night auditor. I worked for Hilton, and it took me 30 to 45 minutes to roll the books if you know all the Excel tricks. I got paid for 8 hours and worked 45 to 50 minutes, then did my own thing for the most part. Story 26. My brother played softball with a guy who sold equipment to hospitals and pharmaceutical companies. A typical day for him was going to lunch with clients. He gets paid over $100,000 a year. Probably even more now, considering a lot of his bosses have retired since I met him 12 years ago. Story 27. $100,000 to refill some hot foods at events. The job pays minimum wage, but the clients like Google, Major League Baseball, National Football League, etc. pay $10 to $15 million for the event and have a mandatory 20% tip that is given to the staff, split evenly with no seniority at all. The job is extremely easy. Stand around and talk to guests or coworkers and maybe do actual work for about half the shift and get fed like a king. Story 28. In technology, from what I can see, it would easily be the dedicated Scrum Master for a team of even semi-competent developers. You run a couple of meetings a day where you basically ask a series of standard questions, move a couple of cards on a project board, and then log off. If the developers are not all brand new, they figure out their own blockers anyway. After that, it is probably the solution architect. Just take a list of requirements and draw up some incomprehensible architectural diagrams using at least 3 new technologies 10 years ahead of where the developers actually operate in the current solutions, drop it on them like you would a microphone at the end of a rap battle, and moonwalk out of the team's call. Story 29. I work for a software company as a project manager for infrastructure and enterprise architecture. From the project management side, I manage about 4 onboarding projects that do not have any strict deadlines. I work from home and am not micromanaged. I make excellent money with bonuses, and the work is not stressful. Now, mind you, it took me years to get here, but it does not have to. Story 30. I'm a project manager for a company that doesn't want anything a project manager can do outside of scheduling meetings and finding things occasionally that they can't find. I don't even have to take notes anymore because I convinced them to let me use a transcriber on every call. I'm getting really good at chess and starting to learn Spanish in my spare time, of which there is plenty. I am constantly paranoid, but I am told often that they couldn't survive without me. I literally took a second job remotely this summer, and they had no idea. I do have great soft skills, and I am a great project manager when needed, in my opinion anyway. I am just at a weird company that both thinks I'm invaluable and at the same time has no clue how to use me. I set up a complete project management office process and standards, software development lifecycle, the lot, and I offered weekly reports and was eventually told they don't want them and don't want to follow any process. I'm instructed to just keep them on track and report when I think the situation is getting critical. Story 31. As a first job for teenagers, I always recommend delivering pizza. You don't make as many tips as you would as a server necessarily, but out of an 8-hour shift, you're going to spend 5 or 6 of those hours sitting in a car listening to music. Sometimes you have to work in the kitchen, but only when it's slow because if it's busy, you always have a drive to take. You get to be outside of your workplace during the worst times to be there. Your income isn't stable, but it rarely dips below $25 an hour and can get as high as $40 an hour. Also, you always have a good mix of cash to limit how often you have to use money in your bank account. The biggest drawback is wear and tear on your car. I end up driving about 40,000 miles a year. That's a lot of oil changes and an almost yearly tire change. Story 32. My job. I walked backward into about 10 hours of remote work and a six-figure salary in a career that's traditionally known not to be easy. I'd argue most job titles can lead to your description, but it will depend on who you work for and what their expectations are versus your current skills. Story 33. I know a jeweler who works 6 months out of the year and lives in Asia for the other half. I know that with the right skills in the right area, a horologist or watchmaker can make $100,000 working about 15 hours a week. Story 34. Firefighter here. There is a station at our department that gets a call every other shift. After morning duties, those guys only get out of their recliners to eat. Can easily make six figures with some overtime,